All right, the midday crash saga continues. Now, in this one, we're going to be discussing carbs specifically and more related to blood sugar levels, because if you are operating on a 24-hour cycle, so your circadian rhythm is optimized and you are eating consistent meals, so you're not skipping breakfast, you are eating a balanced meal every 3 to 4 hours, but you're still experiencing a midday crash, then this is another thing you should be looking into, which is what you're actually eating. Now that we've covered when you should be eating, now we're going to actually look at the structure of your meals and what should be included in those to avoid the afternoon slump. Now, most of you know, if you have a popsicle or a big bowl of ice cream or just specifically carbs alone, so like white bread, for example, most of you know that your blood sugar will spike and then crash because of this, resulting in a peak of energy and then resulting in a crash. So you're losing energy because of that spike of sugar. And most of you guys already know this, but what some of you don't know is that when you're eating protein, it can actually have that same effect. So protein triggers a hormone response, meaning that even though there's not a lot of sugar in the meal, just having a big plate of protein specifically can still trigger an insulin response. So how this causes fatigue is that the insulin is being released, but there's no sugar to be dropped, so it just drops your current level even lower, resulting in this fatigue. So what you want to do is make sure you're having a carb and a protein in every single meal, every snack. So if you are having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then having snacks in between, they have to be a balanced ratio between carbs and proteins. Now you might be wondering, what about fats? Well, fats are an interesting topic where they are kind of in both already. So you can find fats in carbs, you can find fats in proteins. So it's already kind of in the mix without you even really focusing on it. So what you really need to focus on is just making sure you're having carbs and proteins together. So what this might look like is having, a couple hard-boiled eggs with some fruit as your snack, or in the beginning of the day for breakfast, having a smoothie with a side of scrambled eggs or bacon. One classic metabolic boosting breakfast I recommend is having pasture-raised eggs, pasture-raised bacon, as well as having a glass of orange juice with a pinch of salt and then coconut water added to the OJ. This is the perfect breakfast because it has all of the balanced ratios. It has the salt for the electrolytes. It has the fructose from the orange juice. These things are amazing for your blood sugar. And one thing about fructose, a lot of people don't know, is that when you're having fresh fruit that is primarily fructose, fructose doesn't need insulin to be used by the cells. So it doesn't cause this crash and fatigue. So if you have a snack that is primarily fruit, it won't, cause a big spike like any other carb-based meal would. Now, another thing I want to bring up is that not all carbs are the same. And I don't want to use good versus bad because there really is no such thing as good foods or bad foods. Everyone has different lifestyles, different activity levels. So there's no such thing as good or bad when it comes to foods, just the context and how much you are consuming of them. But when it does come to carbs, they process differently. And what I mean by that is when you have metabolically boosting carbs, this includes fresh fruit, potatoes, pure raw sugar, always paired with the protein. So one thing about sugar and specifically is that this always gets labeled as the bad guy, but that's really inconsistent and it could be false because a lot of times when people are blaming sugar as the bad guy, it's always with something else that people never really pay attention to. And they never really, when they're doing these studies and they're conducting that sugar is the bad guy, they're not also testing it with a protein. So of course, if you have sugar by itself, let's say you have juice that is just loaded with added sugar and that spikes your blood sugar, of course that's going to be bad. But people never really think about having that with a protein snack. So if you have real raw sugar paired with a protein, that's going to balance your blood sugar levels and then also give your cells the needed energy because our cells all run off of sugar, off of glucose. So how can this basic ingredient be bad for our cells? This is the very component that fuels our cells. It's usually all the other things that are added to sugar that make it the culprit. Now, going back to carbs, and the ones that I recommend is when you are trying to battle midday fatigue, midday crash, you want to make sure that you are not going too heavy on the carbs. So make sure that you are balancing them with having carbs with equal ratios of protein. Now, this is going to be different for everyone, so the exact ratios of these are going to be different. So if you are fixing this and you still notice that midday crash, maybe lower your carbs even a little bit more and just kind of play around with it and see what resolves this issue for you. But always make sure every snacking meal you have has equal ratios of carbs and proteins. And then looking at the carbs specifically, these should be fresh fruit, potatoes, real sugar. This could be honey, this could be carrots, and maple syrup. These are all very metabolically boosting. Now, the ones I don't recommend are pasta, most breads, rice. This is very dependent on the person. I have clients who react very, very badly to white rice. They get brain fog no matter what. And then I have some clients who react totally fine. Just always make sure if you are trying rice to make sure you have it with the protein. Rice is one that I recommend. It's fine to use. Always go for white rice. I don't recommend brown rice because of the anti-nutrients on the external shell. That's what makes it brown. Anti-nutrients are not good for us, and that's something you'll see later on in the course. But most pastas, most breads, I would just eliminate them altogether. Gluten specifically, I don't recommend. Gluten has this effect on epithelial lining of our cells. So that gut junction, it opens that barrier and it opens us, making us more susceptible to infections and illnesses, also known as leaky gut. It has also been known to do that to our blood-brain barrier. So in our brain, there's a barrier that is very, very strict and only lets certain things in. Gluten specifically has been known to loosen those junctions and allow more things to get through the blood-brain barrier, which is what we don't want. Now, if you are focusing on pro-metabolic carbs and you're always eating carbs with a protein and you still might be feeling this 2 p.m. slump, like no matter what it is, you just feel like you're hitting a wall. One other thing I want to bring up that is related to blood sugar levels is insulin resistance. And if you're not familiar with what insulin resistance is, it basically means that your cells are not being able to properly use glucose. And many people believe that the reason why individuals might have insulin resistance is because of too much sugar. But what they're finding with research and what they're suspecting now is that it's from PUFAs. And I've talked about PUFAs a little bit here in the course. You'll definitely hear more about it as you go on through the modules. But basically what PUFAs are, they stand for polyunsaturated fatty acids. And those are fish oils, that's olive oil, that's canola oil, soy oil. So basically any vegetable oils. Now you might be wondering, how do vegetable oils cause insulin resistance? How researchers are suspecting that this is correlating to diabetes and insulin resistance is that with your cells, sugar and oxygen should be coming in and going out and creating ATP. That is the energy molecule. And what is getting stopped here is our mitochondria. So all these little guys in our cells, which cells can have more than one mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria, that's where this process is happening, where it takes in sugar and oxygen. And this entire process is a lot more complicated than what I'm doing right now currently, but just to simplify it so you guys can understand it better, this process, or cellular respiration, where you have an input and an output, gets inhibited. So the mitochondria, where they're taking in sugar and creating ATP, that is getting damaged. So PUFAs directly damage the mitochondria, relating in not being able to make energy. And when you're not able to use the insulin to make energy, your blood sugar gets backed up, meaning that you can't properly use the sugar for the cells, which then can cause energy crashes. So you're feeling, pretty tired, not in a good place, where you have sugar just building up in your bloodstream. Chronic aspect that comes from this is that once you have insulin resistance from these PUFAs, then that can lead to full-on diabetes. And an interesting graph, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, is it's very easy to understand, where if we just go back in time and look at when they started pushing these vegetable oils, these seed oils, I can't believe it's not butter or Crisco, these things that are not real animal fats, they're PUFAs. If we look at the graph about when they're being used, it has a very steady incline. So it's going all the way up. And the only line that is parallel to that is diabetes. So as butter and real animal fat, so lard is animal fat, as that is going down, diabetes isn't getting any better. It's actually increasing. And you can find the same parallel line with obesity. Basically, any chronic disease is not going down, unfortunately. And I hate to say that, but it's all going up. And one big factor that leads to a lot of modern day diseases, especially in America, where we go crazy over PUFAs because they're literally in everything, it's from seed oils, and it's from these industrial hydrogenated oils. Items that we would never find naturally in nature. However, what we do find naturally in nature is butter. That's been with us since the dawn of time. Same with animal fat and lard. All these things, all those saturated fatty acids have been with us for a long time, a long, long, long time. But seed oils have not. They were just introduced to us as humans within the last 100 years. Now, I thought this graph was super interesting, and I can link the website that I got it from. All respect to Dr. Kate, where I got this information. Now, one more thing that I want to bring up that has to do with what you're eating and having this feeling of midday crash is you might go to an Italian restaurant, or let's say it's like Thanksgiving with your family, and you might get food coma, and you're asking, what is food coma? Well, I'm sure everyone once in their lifetime has experienced this, where you're sitting down with family, you have a very, very large, satisfying, full meal, and then you just want to pass the heck out afterwards. Now, that is due to primarily eating a very large meal. Now, this is why we recommend eating smaller meals, so eating small to medium meals every 3 to 4 hours, depending on you as an individual. Now, you might be asking, what is actually going on when we're experiencing food coma? Well, digesting food is a huge stressor on the body. It takes up a lot of energy. Our gut is gigantic. It has 50 million neurons, more than our spine alone. And so it takes up a lot of energy. And this is why eating a meal right before bed, a large meal before bed, is bad, because the energy that should be going to your brain and tissue repair, normal functions while you're sleeping, is actually going to your gut in order to digest that food, so it's not sitting in your stomach all night. So digesting food takes a lot of energy, and when we have this very large meal, all of the blood flow from our extremities, from our arms and our brain, they actually go to our gut to digest this food. And this might be the sensation that you're feeling after having a large meal, is just your body telling you, hey, I kind of want to relax, preserve energy so I can actually digest this meal for you in a timely manner. So I know we kind of went over a lot in this module, but blood sugar, really regulating it is the biggest stressor to the body. So we have to make sure we're doing our due diligence and paying respect to it. So the biggest key takeaways is make sure you have a protein and a carb together in every meal. You are eating every 3 to 4 hours, and you're not skipping breakfast. So always make sure you are having breakfast. And focus on the right carbs. So make sure you are having the pro-metabolic carbs, such as potatoes, carrots, fresh fruit, honey, dairy, maple syrup. All those things are great for you as long as you pair them with a pro-metabolic protein. Now, we got a little bit into nutrition in this module, but of course there's going to be a whole section on that. As you move on, you'll come across it and we'll go into way greater detail. This is just the items that I'd recommend in focusing on if you are experiencing that dreaded midday crash.